Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where our guest is Hillar Moore. He's a district attorney for the East Baton Rouge Parish, and he's also going to talk to us about how, frankly, crime is rising in East Baton Rouge Parish. He's going to talk to us about what he thinks we can do to help stem the flow and increase in crime, particularly focusing on the young kids and the folks who are most susceptible. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Hillar Moore, district attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today Hillar Moore. He is the district attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. Hillar, thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
Appreciate it. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself. You've been around here for quite a while.
Well, I've been the DA now for 2 years. I've been a practicing lawyer for about 18 years total. Originally from New Orleans, came here to go to school at LSU and didn't leave.
And I love the story about your dad being a World War II vet and actually was over there when they were dropping the bombs.
Yeah, real proud of my dad. Landed on Iwo Jima at 19, Guam, Saipan, served the country honorably, and that's how I was taught and raised. That's how all 7 brothers and sisters were taught and raised with him. Really good teacher to have. And
I think one of 7 kids, is that right?
One of 7.
Big family.
Yep.
And I think I read that your dad was in the Marines 30 years?
33 years, and was the president of Associated Grocers here in Baton Rouge for many years.
Right.
He has a lot of good friends here. He's real active in the community, Mary Bird Perkins, SCORE, Marine Corps League, a lot of things.
Great guy. Tell him thank you for all of us for his service. Not a whole lot of those guys left.
No, we're losing a generation.
It's amazing. Well, as I understand it, like you said, you went to New Orleans schools. I think Brother Martin, you said,
correct.
And got up here, went to LSU criminal justice. Is that right?
Correct.
And then started working what, as an investigator?
Actually, in undergraduate, I was in criminal justice at the time, and you were required to do an internship. And fortunately for me, I was able to do an internship with Mr. O.C. Brown, the DA then.
Right.
And he allowed me to do the internship, which I did, and I stayed extra because I really liked the job. And that was the job that I wanted to have, to be a district attorney's investigator. Fortunately for me, once my internship ended, and I was close to graduating, there was an opening. Mr. Brown hired me on at that time, and stayed there for nearly 12 years as an investigator.
And describe to the folks what an investigator, I mean, is that kind of like CI or NCIS or
the role has somewhat changed over the years. Basically, the district attorney investigator assists the assistant attorneys that are there, and they prepare cases for trial. So they'll receive a file once the police have made an arrest, and they'll go through the file, look at it, prepare it for trial, because our burden is different than the police. Ours is beyond a reasonable doubt, not probable cause. Witnesses leave, move. We need evidence in court, need proof. Track them down. So investigators pretty much fill that role. We also, as investigators and assistant DAs, we go to the murder scenes. You'll see us sometimes on the news where we're at the crime scene, particularly a murder scene, because we have to eventually prosecute that case when someone's arrested. And we've found that we like to see firsthand the crime scene ourselves, talk to the people ourselves, so that we know a year down the road, 2 years down the road, when the case is being presented to a jury, we can not only tell them about the case from a report or pictures, but we were there in person and can describe it better.
And the case is only as good as the facts and the evidence.
Absolutely.
Very, very important part of it. And I guess you kind of got your whistle wet, so to speak, in the law and decided to go to law school.
Well, after graduating for undergraduate with criminal justice, they began a master's degree program, and I entered into that program and progressed for about 30 years in that program. And working for the DA's office, eventually decided that my dream job as DA investigator wasn't going to pay a whole lot of money, and decided to then eventually leave and go to law school, which I did. I graduated from the Southern Law
graduated
Center.
magna cum laude, I read.
Graduated at one of the top of the class, but we had a very good class. A lot of smart people in that group that I had. A lot of good teachers. Once I graduated from Southern, I became a partner with Tony Marabella, who is now a judge.
That's right. I've had
we
Tony
practiced for many years together. And following that, went into my own practice. And my now ultimate dream job is to be the DA. And having run about 2 years ago, was elected to that position and been there for 2 years.
And of course, took over for Doug Morrow, who had been a judge for years and had been district attorney for what, 18?
Actually was an assistant district attorney, city court judge, district court judge, district attorney for 16 years, besides LSU football, Miami Dolphins football.
He has done some stuff, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. And it's fortunate for me that over the years I've had could rely on O.C. Brown, Brian Bush, and now lately, particularly Doug Morrow, who really assisted me in obtaining the job and progressing. And he left me a really good office to lead. Well, have good staff. Explain
to the folks how it works. But you hear the DA's office, and typically what probably pops in people's minds is that they're the guys who, you know, go after the criminals and prosecute them in court. But it's a lot bigger job than that, isn't it?
Yeah, the office is big. It's probably the biggest law office in Baton Rouge. We have 150 employees. 48 of that are attorneys. The others are investigators, clerical staff, counselors, and but the bulk of the job are the attorneys that go to court, prosecute cases. And I think that, as you know, our caseload is fairly high.
It's huge. I was talking between 20 and 25,000 cases.
About 20 to 25,000 cases a year for adult criminal cases. Probably around 6,000 juvenile cases a year.
So how do 150 people get that job done?
Well, it's difficult, but it's just like any other DA's office across the country. You find a way to get it done. Not all cases eventually make it, obviously, to a trial. Sure. Very few trials compared to the caseload. Most are resolved. Most are worked out through a plea in court. A lot of times some are diverted out of system, first-time offenders. And so it has a way of working itself out, but it is a lot of hard work. It seems to be becoming harder every day because of the amount and the type of crime that we have, particularly the juvenile violent crimes that are troublesome.
Hillar,
but it's a job that the people that are there like to do.
Because the perception is absolutely that the crime has gone up significantly in Baton Rouge.
Well, you know, I guess if I were to judge what's going on now compared to maybe when I started 20 or 25 years ago, yeah, I think that you'll see the increase in murders and things like that. Actually, this past year we were 6 murders less than the year before, which is good, but not good enough.
Sure.
But when you look at other cities our size across the nation, you see that Baton Rouge really holds their own, so to speak, with that number. Some cities are better, some are worse. However, we need to do better to get that rate and that number down. How do you do it? Boy, that's a good question. And I think that we have some. Hopefully, we'll talk later about some possible answers.
You got some great ideas on it.
And but yeah, I believe that this year particularly, because of the murder at Beauregard Town, and because of the young man on the levee that's completely innocent, minding his own business, and is shot by a stray bullet. Because particularly those two, people felt unsafe. Said, it's murder capital. When the truth of the matter is, we really finished up better than the year before. Maybe that's not saying a lot, but people should be concerned, and we want them to be concerned because they understand now what maybe we see every day, and generally you may not see.
I've had the police chief and the sheriff on also, and they've made it real clear that all you guys cannot do your job unless the public helps. They are the eyes and the ears. They are the witnesses. They're the ones that provide the evidence, the warning, either advance or after. And if folks don't take this by the tail, we got a problem.
They have to take back their own neighborhood. Well, I guess it begins to take back your own family first. If everyone took care of their own family or neighbors, and then take care of your own neighborhood, and then take care of your own city, then we're good. All of the great technology, you could have the best chief of police, sheriff, DA in the world here. If you don't have witnesses and testimony, that's the lifeblood of court and cases, criminal or civil. But without witnesses, we just
So we need them to participate.
Absolutely.
We'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, Hillar Moore, the District Attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have on the show today Hillar Moore. He's the District Attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. Again, Hillar, thanks for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
We were talking about the perception that crime is high, and the bottom line is it has increased certainly over the years. And we were discussing before the show that statistically, as a percentage of its population, Louisiana incarcerates, puts in prison the largest percentage of their population.
Yeah, and first, perception really turns out to be reality. And so whether our numbers have gone up or not, you know, we can argue about numbers, whether crime rate is up or down. It doesn't matter. It's what the people feel and that whether they're safe or not. We need to make people safe, first of all, and they need to have that feeling. So we all have to do a better job at that. And part of that is actually getting down to the problem of what's causing these severe problems that we have. And
yeah,
yes,
why
we do.
does somebody go into crime?
Yeah, well, I mean, we do incarcerate more than any other population.
And it basically, one out of two guys are let out of prison, one of them's coming back.
Generally, recidivism rates are high across the country, and we here are probably at the average, maybe a tiny bit higher, but the statistics just show that once that person goes to jail, he's going to come back out on the street. 80% of the prisoners come out, and eventually they need to get a job, and unfortunately, half of those eventually come back, and they come back within a few years. So we need to find out what the problem is, what's going on. But to me, it all stems from childhood. If we are not able to get to our children from grades of K through 4 and impress upon them education, that they need education, and get them excited to learn, then we're not going to catch them. We have a difficult time catching up from 5th to 8th. And then much more difficult time catching up in high school.
Really? So you literally chopped it up 1 to 4,
absolutely,
5th to 8th, and then so explain to me how you've come up with that chop.
We have some dedicated child welfare attendants, agents, that truancy officers, so to speak. We also have a place called the TASC Center, TASC Center, Truancy Assessment Center. It's run through LSU, School of Social Work, and they track kindergarten to 4th graders, and that's what they concentrate on. They're in 20 schools here in Baton Rouge, and they really hands-on, and they track the kids from that age all the way through 20, 30 years old, and the kids that they're able to get to, they're able to save and redirect their lives.
So you can stop it?
Absolutely, and but it takes involvement.
Do they target certain schools or certain areas? I guess there's more high crime rate areas than others, huh?
Generally, the schools that the task people concentrate on are about 20 schools, and they're the schools that are considered below the poverty line. That is, 90% have free lunch and free breakfast. First of all, if a child doesn't go to school, that child generally, because it's free breakfast and lunch, that child probably won't eat. So you get a free lunch, free breakfast, and when you're in school, you're able to learn. And they have shown, their research is clear, that if they're able to touch these kids from K to 4, that their success is so much better down the road and continuing through high school and college and obtaining a job and a degree.
So they're embedding their values and their morals or their work ethic into them during that brief period of time.
Absolutely, and not all they can get to. Some they just can't.
Right.
And you can't just be a task worker. It starts at the home with the parent or parents. And as you know, as you see, a lot of times we have single parent homes.
Right.
A lot of times it's mom only, not a dad.
Or grandma.
Oftentimes it's a grandmother or grandfather who's much older than the child. Right. And depending on the age, child is bigger and stronger than grandmother, tough to handle. We've had cases where children are raising children. We've had some cases where neighbors are raising children. Very, very difficult. Some kids that are in school that are there sometimes, but they have to work. More important for them are their parent that they go to work. We've seen all of the excuses as to why children are not in school. Teen pregnancy. A lot of children have been disruptive, bringing guns. What do you do with that child? You send him back to that class? No, you can't. Kids who are 16 in the 8th grade,
it's not going to happen.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so, but we are finding ways. The superintendent, Mr. Dilworth, is fantastic.
So do you? I guess you try and import into the kids 1 to 4th a certain set of skills or morals or whatever, and then from 5th to 8th, do you treat them differently, or they're different sets of tools or folks?
Well, unfortunately,
there's not resources, are there?
Unfortunately, there's no resources.
I remember
there are
40,000. The same thing.
There are 42,000 children in public school, and I believe at last count there were 7 or 8 child welfare attendants agents. So you make that division, that calculation, and then task workers are about the same. There's just not. It's like being an assistant DA or public defender. The caseload is overwhelming. You have to concentrate on the ones that you really have to concentrate on. So I would like to see more people in that area, but it's money, And you have to touch these people.
And you said it when we were talking about folks who are in prison, that it's extraordinarily expensive. So it's society's going to pay one way or the other. And
well,
either we're going to pay to incarcerate folks when they're adults, or we can pay when they're young and try and give them, I guess, the skills.
Sure, I think we all would like to see building more and better schools so that your child would like to go to the school as opposed to having roofs that leak and schools that are run down. I mean, go to some other states and see their schools, it looks like campuses. You'd see why a child would want to go to school. We have some very good principals, very good school teachers. I'd like for them to have all of the power again and not the children or the parents. And hopefully we're eventually working
How does that
in
happen?
that regard.
What do you do to make that happen?
Well, it's everybody working together. I mean, you've heard the stories of, again, kids bringing guns to school, being disrespectful. Teachers can't, take care of the problems in the class because of afraid of what the parent will say or what the law may do. We need to give the teachers the power. The teachers are very close to these children. Next closest thing than parents. The teachers on the front line.
Is there legislation that you know of, or that somehow that we could get behind that would encourage such a thing to take place, or is it just?
You can make as many laws and legislation that you want. If it doesn't come from that person and within, you don't want to do it. It's just not going to happen.
And of course, the teacher's only there for a certain period of time during that day. It's really the family unit, I guess, that's disintegrating, which is what you said
start with
earlier.
the family unit, and we'd rather build more schools than prisons. And if we don't take care of our kids, our own children, what you're going to do is you're going to find you're going to have a bigger DA's office, you're going to have more prisons, you're going to have more police and sheriffs on the street because you have to handle that population.
And you're going to have more crime.
You're going to have more crime because you'll add more police, and that will add more summonses and more arrests because they'll see more or find more. It can be a cycle, but we really have to stop it and look at it. To me, we've pretty much ignored for 50 years, and that's maybe not the correct term, but we haven't paid as much attention to juveniles and resources that we need to spend with them and give to them as maybe we should. We only have 2 juvenile court judges there. They work very hard. It's sad to hear and see some of the cases of the kids that come through, some of the violence that you see. But it's also sad to see some of the attitudes of the parents. And then when you hear and listen to that, then you know why that child is probably there. And so we just all have to do a better job of finding out what's causing the problems that we have. And I would suspect that easily the answer is our children are eventually become a delinquent and then eventually become criminals, and not all.
So we need to invest in
We need to invest more in the children and education and programs for kids.
All right, we'll talk about this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Hillar Moore, the District Attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have on the show today Hillar Moore. He's our District Attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. Again, Hillar, thank you for being on the show.
Good to be here.
We're talking about kids and how bottom line is we're going to pay money at the end or at the beginning, and it frankly would seem to be much more economical if you're strictly analyzing in those terms to do it when they're children and give them the skills and contribute to society. Well, let's talk about the folks that, they hit the system and they commit a crime. Let's say a young lady is raped. Okay. Let's take that victim through the process. What happens?
Well, that's a more difficult one to answer.
Because I know briefly, there's a rape crisis.
There's a rape crisis center. Police would be called once the report is made. That victim would then be asked whether she wants to actually go through and make the report. She would then be taken to a hospital where she would be evaluated. A rape kit would be conducted by a doctor that's on staff from the Rape Crisis Center. She would be counseled and go through that whole process, and hopefully the police would eventually come up with a suspect. The arrest is made. Rape victims it's a tough one to be.
How does it go about? Typically, how is someone arrested?
Well, oftentimes they know each other or have some idea who it is. On the other cases where they don't, obviously we rely on physical evidence. And
so the victim will fill out a form, a complaint,
not really.
An affidavit? What are they filling out?
They'll tell the officers what occurred.
Okay.
And the officers go back and process the scene, look for hair, semen, DNA, fingerprints.
Okay. Now, what about somebody that just gets punched in the face? Do they sign an affidavit or a claim, or how?
Normally, someone gets punched in the face, they call the police. Police come out, and there's really no affidavit or filing of charges.
Okay.
Charges are filed by the DA's office. It's just a report that's made. That report is made, and then an arrest is either made or a summons is issued, and the process begins by that person being given the summons or arrested, and eventually comes before a judge.
What determines whether or not they are arrested immediately at the scene of the crime versus just given a summons?
Well, summonses are generally just for misdemeanor offenses only.
And a misdemeanor is defined
misdemeanor
as what?
is a term of imprisonment of 6 months or less.
Okay.
And that's generally a misdemeanor. Felonies are above 6 months or more.
Okay.
There's relative felonies and felonies, but generally most felonies are put in jail.
Okay.
Some exception with summonses, and it begins the process where they would be bonded out of jail. Eventually the file would come to our office within 4 or 6 weeks. We review the file to determine whether we can prosecute the case.
And does the investigator review it, or does a prosecutor?
Both.
Okay.
Both an investigator and a prosecutor.
And they're looking, I guess, to decide whether or not there's enough evidence to go forward.
Correct. Again, we have probable cause versus beyond a reasonable doubt. So our standard is higher. We look to see whether there's been previous cases that are similar to this incident, and see what that person has done. We're in contact with the defense lawyer if there is one, or the public defender's office, and we start the process then.
And so depending on whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, or I guess a more severe crime, determines whether it's a bill is issued or an indictment's required?
Correct. There's some cases where indictments are required: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, those that carry life imprisonment, death. But we have to go to the grand jury. Most of the time, vast majority, are just a bill of information, a piece of paper that we sign, bring in charges against the defendant.
And that's based on a decision looking at all the evidence and facts that we can meet our burden of proof in a court of law.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
And then at that point, I guess there's an arraignment.
There's an arraignment to come before the judge, and generally the judge asks, we're guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity or no contest. Vast majority plead not guilty.
Not guilty, sure.
And it's not a factual statement that I'm actually not guilty. It's a legal plea of not guilty. It's a little hard to explain, but that starts the next process, which is motions, where lawyers are able to file motions and find out a little more about your case. Eventually it's set for a trial.
And jury versus bench trial is determined by what?
By the penalty that's imposed, and the defendant gets to choose, as you know, whether they want to be tried by a judge or a jury. And now, with the new law, they must decide 45 days in advance. So we know we're preparing for a jury trial or for a judge.
Great. All right, and then the trial takes place, and then if they're found guilty, what happens?
If they're found guilty, the court would then do a pre-sentence report, again, depending on the type of crime. And probation officer would come out and interview victims, witnesses, defendant, hear from all sides, and court would eventually either have a sentencing hearing or just have a sentencing date and pronounce the court's sentence.
Now, you indicated previously that not all cases go to trial. Oftentimes they're going to be, I would call them settled, but it's a plea bargain, is it not?
Yes, it's a. We look at the facts of the case. Things change over time, especially in the cases that we handle, and the violent crime cases. As you know, we have a difficult time
with
witnesses coming to court, protecting witnesses, evidence that we have or don't have. People change statements. So we always have to judge our case every time we go to court and see where it is at that point.
So maybe in the best interest of society to get them to plead guilty to this, because you may not get them on the more difficult.
Absolutely. That is oftentimes the case.
Okay.
Or some victims say, I don't want to testify, I'd rather not go to court. It's okay to resolve it this way.
And as I understand it, there's also a victim's bill of rights, so to speak.
Correct.
Explain that to the folks.
Well, again, I think one of the things we've been poor at is handling victims and witnesses of crime. They always seem to get left behind. And with all of the recent cases that we've had over the nation, there's a victim's bill of rights, and now victims have a little more right to participate and to obtain notice. Notice is the main thing. What we've done at the DA's office here, we've employed victims assistance coordinators. It's actually people that will sit with and talk to that victim and find out more about that victim and the witness, and hold our hand through the process, because this is Greek to them, as it should be.
And it's painful.
It's painful, and we still need to do a better job. I'd like to have more of those. They really assist the investigators and the attorneys, because they're in court, do what they have to do, and can't always return the calls or see them or hold a hand like we would like to. But these people stand on that and do that for us.
Explain to the folks how the system works for a kid who just makes a dumb mistake.
Well,
they've never been involved with the system before, and they just screwed up.
Yeah, it's, again, it depends on how dumb that mistake is. Unfortunately, some kids make bad mistakes in the first armed robbery, drinking and driving and kill somebody. Difficult to assist in those areas. But the vast majority are smaller offenses, just not using the head and not mature enough. We have a pretrial diversion program for certain offenses where we try to divert them out of the system so we don't mark them up, so that they eventually can get a job and it doesn't stay on their record, so that when they go to apply for the job or graduate from school, they can say charges were dismissed or my record's expunged.
And explain the expungement to the folks.
Well, certain crimes you're allowed to have your record expunged if you complete all of the conditions, or if the charges are dismissed, or if you're found not guilty. And that wipes your record clean. Under Louisiana law, if your record is expunged, you're able to say under oath, although if you may have pled guilty and had it dismissed under deferred adjudication, you're able to tell an employer that the charges against me have been dismissed, my record's expunged. So it is a great benefit to those first-time offenders that get that.
And the bail bond system is basically you put up money, you got 6 months to make sure they show up, and if they don't, they lose that money or property.
Generally, yes.
Hillar, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate it. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines, Hillar Moore, our District Attorney for East Baton Rouge Parish. Thank you for being with us.